whom it may concern. My name is Derek, and I want to tell you a story. You see, my 6-year-old son, Corbin, was diagnosed with autism when he was 2.5 years old. A hearty revelation that has single-handedly changed our small young family forever. But when talking about autism, you will rarely hear me spouting off statistics about diagnosis rates, and you won't ever hear me on a street corner screaming about how this hideous, devastating disorder is cheating these children out of a normal life, because, well, autism is not. And quite frankly, normal is just a setting on the dryer. What would happen if Sir Isaac Newton, Nikola Tesla, or even Albert Einstein thought on a normal level? All three of them geniuses in their respective fields, and still, however, men who shared the characteristics of an autistic mind. So that puts us in a tough spot, don't you think? I mean, I must be crazy if I think I can actually convince the general public that people with autism are in fact the intellectual minds that will shape our future. And truly, I'm not sure if that's the entire message either. Because, in one hand, we have children with a very different mind and potential to use that mind in a uniquely effective way. On the other hand, we have a definitively serious neurological disability. So as a parent, what do? I find myself in a paradox. When does disability become ability? And where do we draw that line? More importantly, who's drawing the line? Now, I don't want to tell you the story of autism from which you've read about in medical journals or heard in a news report. No, I want to tell you the story of autism from the front lines. The story we as parents and caregivers already know. That thing people with autism are simply born with. That thing autism should be known for. And why that thing is so important. This is the story of a thing without a name.
This hideous thing crawled out from under a rock and shouted to the world, I don't have a name. And everyone stared, minus the minority. And they hoped that everyone would learn to do the same. But it had scales and feathers, stripes and checkers, a sickly shade of green. The professionals were baffled by this creature all its own. It was like nothing they had ever seen. It belonged in no kingdom, and it didn't have a class. Was this hideous thing a premonition, or something left here by the past? Oh, the hideous thing that didn't have a name. Oh, the story of a thing without a name. Undesired fame. Oh, the story of a thing without a name.
Our story begins in 2006 when my wife Amanda and I were married. A couple of carefree newlyweds exploring the exciting world of adulthood. We had the world at our fingertips and life was ours for the taking. Towards the end of the year would bring us our first bundle of joy, a 7-pound healthy baby boy named Corbin. He came into the world as any typical healthy baby would. The same helpless cries, booty socks, and 2 a.m. feeding calls echoed our humble little condo. But as he grew, we noticed something was different about him. You see, by 8 months old, he began to crawl. However, he did not crawl correctly. He used this kind of worm move to get around. Corbin was indeed a bit different, and by his 18-month mark, we knew something was seriously going on with him. He went on to be evaluated for developmental delay and was immediately placed in a home therapy program. We found that virtually everything he was to learn had to be forcibly and consistently taught to him. He did not walk, he did not talk, and his ever-present wandering gaze felt as though hope would never prevail. We worked tirelessly to teach him sign language, my wife's hands clasped around his, pushing them together in a fashion I'd only seen before in Helen Keller movies. And like skipping records, we'd say, more, more, more. When Corbin turned 2, he was enrolled in a school for special needs children, and at this point was able to walk with assistance. Though he started showing signs of development, the reality of how far behind he was beginning to sink in. And on the 10th day of April, 3 days before Easter of 2009, we met with a specialist doctor who had been studying Corbin for nearly a year prior. His words still echo as I think back. Corbin has autism.
Let me tell you a little bit about what autism is. First of all, it's not just one thing. Autism is actually a group of developmental disorders that impact our kids. And this disorder impacts their communication, their behavior, and also their social skills. And really, depending on the child, it determines on how severe each child is impacted. Autism is really a growing concern for health officials and for families in Utah and nationally. You know, as we look at the prevalence rates, they continue to rise off the charts. You know, essentially, as we look at the most recent numbers that have come out, found that 1 in every 88 kids across the country are impacted on autism. And for some reason in Utah, we're hit even harder. Our numbers are 1 in every 47 kids. And depending on the area, it can be even more severe.
So there you have it. Autism is a neurological disorder affecting a plethora of developmental areas. And though clinically that's correct, autism is much deeper than a disability. Autism is also in many ways a personality.
I'm a little funny, helpful, independent, smart, and awesome.
My name is Brent Newbury.
I'm Julie Newbury, and our daughter Sydney is 6, and she has PDD-NOS on the autism spectrum.
With it being our first child, we might have gone years with just waiting, because the doctors were saying that she might just be developing slow speech-wise.
Autism was never, from what we knew of autism, the kids don't talk and they don't make any eye contact. They just grunt and rock. That's what we thought autism was.
The first time that I had someone mention it to me, I was at a bakery, and the person behind the counter was looking at her, watching her going around the room and tracing the letters on the wall and saying S, T, whatever. And she just said, "Oh, she's so cute. Is she autistic?" And she was 2 at the time. And I thought, no, of course she's not. She's smart. She knows how to count to 30. She knows her ABCs. She's just fine. But that was the first time that I've had anybody really bring it up to me. And after that, a few other people just mentioned, well, maybe we should get her checked out speech-wise, because she was obviously, when you compared her with a group of children her own age, there was definitely some sort of delay.
I sat up the rest of the night till 4 in the morning researching autism, and I knew that's my daughter. She has autism.
When I grow up, I want to be a movie director to direct some funny movies. There's Sydney and the Magic Ball. Once upon a time, there was a girl named Sydney, and she was looking for a great Easter present for her sister named Jane. She grabbed her backpack and went to the Rising River.
Sydney is just one of many of these children with the natural-born talents to shape the dreams of her own future. As we look back at the minds of how these individuals operate, we can see that amidst what we view as disability, autism can also help a variety of specific abilities and talents in those affected.
I was playing The Sims 2 and this happened. And oh, never mind. Well, this didn't happen. I made it glitch. And now they're through each other. And it looks like, well, her name's Mary and his name's TJ, and it looks like she's, like she forced him to hug her, and he's not happy. That's what it looks like. Anyway, bye.
It's 6 minutes long, and it's about like intersection within The Sims 2. In computer animation, one surface doesn't know where another surface is, and it goes through it.
My name is Benjamin Alfredo Diaz. I have high-functioning autism and am 25 years old. A person who wanted to put together this book of people with autism who does art and stuff, and I am featured in this book. Usually when I draw, I don't really have I guess, really an intent on what it's going to be. I just randomly draw things and hopefully it comes out well. The kind of art I do is anime, but anime manga style, but I like to branch off from that, do kind of like doing, I guess, kind of gothic emo, trying to develop a more unique style than just the regular anime style. Autism has given me an advantage. It has made me, I guess, excel a lot faster than others, more or less, I guess. I'm still living with my folks, my mom and dad. It's not really the best. I would like to be, I guess, more out in the world, doing my own thing without being told really what to do, as in, I don't feel as free as I want to be. I have done commissions online drawing for people and got paid from that. I guess I try to act normal, try to see what other people are doing. I consider myself normal. I mean, like, if you were to look at other people, you could say other people have more problems that they are not diagnosed, I guess. But not to be very stereotype, but I just find it as a word or a description. It doesn't really bug me, really.
It has been said among members of the autism community that if you've met one person with autism, well, you've met one person with autism, a statement which adds to the complexity of this consistently shifting spectrum disorder, and a concept some have been trying to promote a deeper perspective of.
I think we're just ghosts in our daughter's world. We drift in and out of her consciousness like shadows. We're not relevant. I'm not relevant as a father. I don't think she means to leave us out, but she barely notices us. I gotta wonder, does she even care? I don't know, but I don't think she does. Is that a terrible thing to say?
I'm Anna Hargadon, and I studied theater at BYU. I kind of made up my own major of theater for people with autism and graduated without a teaching license, which was kind of scary, but I felt like if I can build up my resume, then I'll have opportunities to do what I feel passionate about.
Sometimes I can be watching her brothers and I know exactly what's going through their minds. When I watch Lindsay, I have no idea. I mean, what is she feeling on the inside? Sometimes she's in her own little world, just skipping around or swinging on the swing, and there's this happiness and she's giggling to herself, and I wonder, what does that feel like? You know? She's pulling away from my world, but she seems so happy. Maybe it's better if I don't intrude.
For my doctoral dissertation at the University of Utah, I interviewed 34 parents who had kids with autism, different ranges on the spectrum, from lower to higher functioning, Asperger's, to PDD, to classic autism, and the kids ranged in age from 3 to 23, and there were fathers and moms and grandmas. And I did kind of a traditional qualitative dissertation where what you do is you draw themes out of the multiple stories. But at one point I decided I had to kind of tell a story in the words of the parents by taking all of the parents and putting them into one story.
Sometimes I think about writing a book about autism, but not one that's all depressing and all, but one that shows how funny autism can be. I mean, really, sometimes you just have to laugh about what your kid does. Joseph is always watching TV and picking up quotes and lines from cartoons and movies and using them for his own words. You know, like, he doesn't have words of his own, so he uses the words of the characters. And sometimes it's just so hilarious. I burst out laughing. Like the other day at church, and that's a whole nother story, being with Joseph at church. we were singing the songs, and I love to sing, so I was just belting out this hymn, and Joseph is really sensitive to loud noise, and so all of a sudden, loud as can be, he turns around and says, "Hey Dad, shut your pie hole."
I met Tracy at the autism conference here at UVU and had been feeling the desire to tell stories somehow of people with autism. I'm a storyteller, and I just had this feeling that something needed to happen. And so when I heard Tracy's meta-narratives, I was like, yes.
She said, well, can you create more of those? So then I went back to those 34 interviews and said, well, can we make about 5 or 6 characters pulling together all of these voices and turn it into kind of 6 voices? So that's what we did, and we so I would send some information to her and some narratives, we called them, and she would give me feedback on them, and we kind of took it from there. But the research was so rich. There were so many. We could do 100 different plays with 100 different voices and characters.
I see us growing old together. Although we've already told our other kids, you get him for the summer. But seriously, after we retire, my husband and I have always dreamed about traveling, and I envision us traveling with him a lot. I want to get a tandem bike we could ride together, because I just want him to keep him active and keep him outside and doing things. I just don't want him sitting on the computer all day long and getting... I worry what he's going to do as he turns into an adult and he's no longer in school. And he could live in a group home, like one that's supervised, but I don't think he'd live anywhere that's not supervised. His reasoning's just not there, so we've always said, when we get a camper or a trailer, we'll have space for Preston. Maybe we'll build in a bunk bed. There will always be a wing for Preston. I don't want him to be lonely, ever.
At this point, you might be wondering why all of this is so important. Why in the world would I take the time to write you about something that may not even be on your radar? Beneath every family affected by autism, underneath the smiling, carefree faces, lies a darkness.
Colby, are you laughing? Tickle him, Carter.
My name's Julie Williams. My son is Colby Williams. He is severe autism with OCDs. He wasn't as severe, well, he was functionable in our household growing up. He had his quirks, but we knew how to control it, and he had very good schooling to attend and a lot of help through the school district. Very affectionate. A lot of autistics don't like to be touched. He's the opposite. He loves to cuddle and hug, and he loves his family. He went through, graduated high school, and as soon as he turned 20, he was removed from high school to a post-high school program, which is when he turned extremely violent. They pulled him out in the middle of a school year because of his birth date, and it's been downhill for the past year. The only thing he can say is Bubba, his nickname. His father's from the South, and he gave him that when he was little. And so if you ask him who's the man, he does this as well.
He understands things quite well. He can process them, but he can't do things on his own. He can't tie his shoes. He can't bathe himself.
I shave him, brush his teeth.
He can't make his own food.
We had adult diapers on him until a year ago.
Barely, yeah.
Just toilet trained him a year ago. The slightest thing, the rug on the kitchen floor disshuffled, will set him off. I've removed his closet doors. They slide on tracks, and there's a gap between the door jamb and the sliding door because it's just out of a line, and so he's picked them up and thrown them across his bedroom.
He's thrown dishes.
He's thrown dishes at Bianca.
At me, yeah.
He hit her in the head and sent her to the emergency room.
He's put his hand through 2 glass windows.
2 glass windows.
He broke our windshield.
He kicked my windshield out when I was driving. We have 9 huge holes in the wall right now that need repaired. But I've repaired before and he just puts them through again. They would pay for him to be institutionalized, but they won't pay to help me keep him in my home. That's messed up. I don't think they're aware of how messed up their policies are. Our biggest concern is keeping the rest of the family safe and keeping him in our home. Because when he's happy and under control, he's a great part of the family. And it's not my goal to put him in a home. I don't think he belongs in one.
Doesn't.
The willingness for the state to pay for ineffective services or services that do not allow a person with autism to achieve their full potential and become a contributing member of society is a direct result of outdated policies. And so our policymakers need the information that's relevant so they can update our policies to our current environment. We have more individuals with autism, but we also have access to better services that can help them achieve better lives. They can keep them out of institutions. They can help them hold jobs, to function in a family environment where they're not abusing their parents or their siblings. We have those services available, but we don't have the policy in Utah up to date to cover those services.
The reality is that, from the studies that we've seen and the research that's taken place thus far, is that we understand we have the ability to move the needle for each child. Now, how much we can move it is different for each child and depends on the severity. There's lots of factors. It's highly variable. But for each child, we can have a positive impact on that, on their skill set. But it takes the right amount of intervention and the appropriate type of intervention to be able to move that needle.
Ready, set, go! Go!
My 2.5-year-old, she was diagnosed with autism May 2010. Her name is Skylin. We knew something was going on since she was really young. As she's a few weeks old, she was crying if I sang to her. She didn't point, she didn't clap, she didn't do any of the normal things. So at about, like I said, May 2010, a little bit after 2, she was diagnosed with autism. The very first thing that happened is we were denied our insurance claim with our well child visit. That just said, we met with our doctor. Our doctor said, I think she has autism. We said, we think she does too. She referred us to a specialist. We went to a specialist 2 or 3 months later. The specialist confirmed, yes, she has autism. And the next week, we got a denial from our well child visit. They said, we will not cover the visit because it says autism on it. And then right after that, we got the denial for the specialist that they wouldn't cover autism. So I called our insurance company and I said, why are you denying our visit? I don't understand. And they said, well, she has autism. There's nothing we can do to help her. The autism diagnosis in and of itself was devastating enough to have my insurance company, who I naively trusted to care about me and my family, tell me, we can't help your child at all, was devastating. And for days, I was like, okay, apparently my child's a lost soul. There's nothing anybody can do to help her. But then I started doing research, like every parent. I delved into the internet, read a whole bunch of books, and I learned there's very effective treatment available: occupational therapy, speech therapy, and more than anything else, applied behavioral analysis. ABA therapy works. There's studies that show that 47% of kids that receive ABA therapy are normal compared to their peers. I'll say normal, that they're intellectually able to function just like their peers. 47% is a huge percent, so there is something that helps.
As we look at the kids with the appropriate amount of intervention and the right amount of treatment, we can change the trajectory that child will have in life. And for us, we see it as potentially the difference between a child that needs to be cared for their entire life, whether through parents or through other organizations, or one that at least acquires the acquires the skills where they can live in a productive, independent adult lifestyle, and whatever that means for that child. But that's really, as we look at what our organization does, what other service providers, across the state, it's a team effort. We try and be very collaborative in our work, because we want, at the end of the day, each one of these kids to succeed. We want there to be seamless transitions between if they come into our program and they move on to another, or they go into a school district, or wherever they're heading. We need these organizations talking to each other, and we need that higher level of cooperation, so that at the end of the day, it's the child and the family's needs who are really being met through these network of organizations and providers.
We really strongly believe that children with autism that receive these services and are able to achieve their full potential will become contributing members of society rather than burdens on society. We will reduce the number of individuals that are placed into long-term care institutions. We can reduce the burden on the state for special needs services in the educational system if they have outside support that's appropriate and designed for success.
Words like bankruptcy and foreclosure are not words one would expect when thinking of autism. However, for families of autism in the US and in Utah in particular, these words are all too common. So the next most obvious question is why? Why are autism families among virtually every social class in the Wasatch Front experiencing such financial ruin?
I'm mother of triplet boys, and they're almost 9 years old. He would do really strange things, and he was only 2 pounds 11 ounces when he was born, and the other two were just a couple ounces bigger than him. And I had 3 so I could compare, and you're not supposed to do that, but I did it anyway. When he was laying on his back, he'd kick his little feet up in a little V position, and he would do it over and over like a repetitive movement. When he was diagnosed, I was kind of relieved. And because at least I knew what it was. I knew there was something going on with him in the first, after he got home from the hospital, and as I watched him progress, again, comparing him with the other two, things just weren't quite right. And so I questioned it for a year and a half, and no one would really come out and diagnose it. And finally, when they did, I was like, okay, at least I know now I can sign up for services, get a plan, start getting the therapies. But like the specialized therapies that kids need, we haven't been able to do much of that because insurance doesn't cover it. And we can't afford to pay for it. We're still recovering from sending them to a private school for kindergarten. I was never really involved in politics or anything. It kind of bored me. But once we got this diagnosis of autism, and with the early intervention, maybe funding being cut and everything, it just started the ball rolling for me. And you have to be involved as a parent to advocate for your kids, because these kids need it.
There have been a number of studies, looking at how does autism impact families. First of all, it's the financially, right? Because lifetime costs associated with treating it treating autism and helping your child with autism is about $3.5 million.
We're working towards insurance legislation that requires insurance carriers in the state of Utah to cover services for autism, including but not limited to speech therapy, occupational therapy, medical services, psychiatric care, psychological care, and behavioral therapy. I can say we've had 56 meetings, 3 of them have been negative. Now that means 53 of them we've met with legislators, and even if they started out saying, we don't tell private business what to do, or we won't support a mandate, when they start to understand all of the various facets of autism, when they start to realize the impact to taxpayers, the impact to families, the impact to individuals, and they start to put that together and realize the extent of this issue, then they really turn. And I have seen these grown men bawl in these meetings as these families share their experiences, as they start to understand how critical this issue is to every single one of us, not just families with autism, but to everybody.
Because of those meetings, the beginning of the session, every legislator on the Hill knew autism was going to be a big deal that year. During the session, we had 3 to 10 families up there every single day, meeting with legislators saying, this is still important. We said it was important before the session, it's still important now.
We are so fortunate in the United States of America to have the opportunity to view a legal situation, view the laws within our own local environment, and change them. We can say this is unjust, this is incorrect, insurance carriers should not be allowed to discriminate against children with autism, and we can change that.
You can take it from the many and give it to the few. They will use it to help themselves watching you. You can claim that the system must be protected, but the system is flawed and it should be rejected. Can call it economics if that's what you choose. A few will win, but many will lose. See as the weave of lies unfurls, missing no way to run the world.
Our job tonight, we were planning on helping everybody charge up the hill of the House for a battle, but we have a problem in the Senate. And the insurance industry doesn't know that we know about the problem in the Senate. So tonight, very quietly, under cover of darkness, spreading word of mouth, like when they're making night moves or when they're moving around in war and they're pointing two fingers. This is a two-finger situation where you're pointing and helping the rest of the autism community around the state of Utah move around that hill so that you guys are ready to strike tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. Mountain Time.
We got to the point that we had a problem where there was a bill that we were not in favor of, and we called on the community. We said, community, autism community, you have to call and say that you are not in favor of this bill. This bill is going to cause us problems for our mandate, so call. Everybody call and say you're not in favor. We shut down the Capitol switchboard. We literally shut it down. They would not let any more phone calls through because we shut it down. Nobody could get through except for our phone calls.
You all got an opportunity to let the Senate of Utah know that without a doubt the community really wants to see this happen this year. You all made a great noise and it was terrific. It's definitely going to, you want to make sure that your bill rises above the other 799 that those legislators are going to have to deal with because the squeaky wheels get the grease.
Show them your mop bucket you got for your birthday. That's the wax, yeah. What about this? Show them your highway patrol card. That's his rank. Oh. Yeah, your doorknob got taken off. You kept putting it through the wall. The key. Yes. There's your police car. Show me your police car. What's your name? Owen. How old are you? You're 11, huh? When Owen was young, it didn't stand out as much. You know, him not speaking wasn't a big deal. We'd go to stores and people wouldn't think anything. So he, you know, and he looks normal. You'd see him in a room with other children. You'd never think that something's different about him. And in a way, it was always kind of a blessing. But then other ways, it wasn't because people just thought he was really spoiled or disrespectful or I was a bad mom or look what she's allowing him to do. No, but okie dokie artichoke. My husband was there to help out, but he passed away recently, about a year ago. I was really worried because when we took him to the hospital, I know he knew that was his dad laying there in the emergency, you know, in the ICU. I would tell him, you know, Daddy's sick, but I didn't get a response. It was just he ignored kind of what I was saying. I didn't get much eye response or he knew I would go to the hospital. He knew Daddy was in the hospital because he'd asked to go see him in the hospital. My biggest fear was that he wouldn't understand why Daddy wasn't coming home. I wasn't sure. We went to have my husband's funeral services, and I didn't want to have a casket because I didn't want the kids to see him like that. So we went with cremation, and so I wasn't sure if Owen would understand. But at the funeral services, just after we got done with the services, we were sitting on a bench, and Owen broke down and just laid on the ground and started sobbing. And at that point, I knew that he understood exactly what we had just done, what was going to happen, that he wasn't going to see his dad anymore.
For
me, it's not so much as finding a cure, because if you look at our world, there are many things that we have benefited from people that are autistic. Some really good individuals that have brought a lot to us, and they're autistic, and that's how they were able to, you know, create and come up with the ideas that they had.
The successes bring the joy, because I think that instead of looking at what you lose, you need to look at where you've gained and the achievements, because these kids' achievements are every bit as important as any neurotypical child. They're just different achievements.
I like to play video games. I also like to play on computers. I like to read at night sometimes, and I watch TV sometimes, and that's pretty much all I like to do.
I've seen what community awareness has done for our family. Like, it is easier to take her to the store now than it was even just 6 years ago. You know, people don't just look at me as a bad mom with a tantruming kid. They know something's different. She's having a harder time. Be nice.
Don't judge, you know, me and my child until you've walked, you know, a day in our shoes, because you have no idea.
Our son having autism has been a huge blessing for us. It has taught us everything about acceptance. It's taught us about different cultures, how we should, you know, just because they might eat different things or wear different things, how it is. And I think it would be cool if leaders of nations could learn to be, just have some autistic kids around so they could learn that as well.
Right now I just enjoy being with him, and I try to kind of live in the moment whenever I spend and do things with him. We're in scouting. I'm his Cub Scout leader, basically, because I don't trust anybody else with him. And so I say, well, I'll go ahead and lead. And it helps out a lot. He likes going to scouting. I mean, I don't think he likes a lot of the kind of the sitting classroom stuff, but he likes going on hikes and he likes doing stuff. And so we do that together.
What do we watch on TV? What do we like to see?
Barbie.
Yes, we love to see Barbie. Is there a lot of music in Barbie shows?
Yeah.
Yes, and we love it. And what do we do when the music comes on?
Dance.
Yes, we love to dance to Barbie.
Sundays I don't have school, but Saturday's the only day I don't have to do anything. And today's Saturday.
Look, there's someone on both swings. The swings are full. I know. I'm sorry. Do you want to spin? Or slide? Come on, let's go spin. Can we go spin? We're gonna get hurt. Come on, let's go spin. Come on.
House Bill 69 never made it out of the Rules Committee in the House. It never had a vote in the House floor or the Senate floor. It just never made it out of Rules. Our understanding is that the House leadership didn't feel they were going to be able to pass it, so they decided to bring forth a different bill that would still help autism families. 69 was the bill that should have passed. Did we have the votes in the Senate? We're not sure. It's true that the Senate, we are more shaky. We had the votes in the House. We very much believe we had the votes in the House. The number one thing I hear from advocates is they just wish we had a vote. And that's kind of how I feel. Even if our bill would have died, give us a vote. Let our bill come forward, let us know who votes yes, and let us know who votes no. We just want to know. We want to know. And if we die this year, that's fine. You know, it's not a battle, it's a war. Now, I won't say that it's Republicans or Democrats that are killing everything. What the problem honestly is, the state insurance lobbyists are powerful. They're very powerful, and there was a lot of them against us. They have a lot of money and they have a lot of power, and they're using it. And I think that as a community, we didn't need to know how powerful we are, that it takes the insurance companies so much to fight us. They know that this isn't going away. They know this is one of the biggest issues in Utah. Coming up in 2013, you know, 2014, we will not go away until this passes.
I have a lot of hope for the future, for these families and for these children. You know, I've seen miracles happen when you're able to get the right resources for that child. And I think some wonderful conversations are taking place right now, both politically, within our communities, among organizations, and in ways I wish I could fast forward it and get to the end of the tape and see where it's going to take us. But there's a lot of wonderful people who are involved in this effort, and a lot of passionate parents. And if it weren't for parents who really care about this issue, we wouldn't have seen the advancements that we've seen today. It's been on their backs, that we've been able to make all the advances that we have, and new organizations have come about, new resources become available, things that are happening up on Capitol Hill. It's thanks to our wonderful, passionate parents.
So here we are, at the end of my story. A story shared among a community of passion, motivation, and strength to seek social change. And yet, among all that we fight for, away from all the tears and heartache, lie individuals who we love, who we see not as a thing, but as people living the life they were born into. And at least for Corbin's sake, it is a life like none other. We love him for who he is, and that thing that makes him who he is. So begs the question, will this thing ever truly be understood? Will this thing ever really have a name? And is that thing a blessing or a curse? I know some call that thing autism, but I call him Corbin. And the only truth I know is, he's not a thing. He's our son. A kid with a name. Yours truly.
Benjamin Alfredo Diaz. I'm a sauce.
Attention and
waiting and waiting.
You're
and
waiting very good, honey.
my best buds are Ryan, Vanessa, Abby, Jesus, and my pet fish, Iron Man.
Speech-wise. Autism was never, from what we knew of autism, the kids don't talk and they don't make any eye contact. They just grunt and rock. That's what we thought autism was.
The first time that I had someone mention it to me, I was at a bakery. And the person behind the counter was looking at her, watching her going around the room and tracing the letters on the wall and saying S, T, whatever. And she just said, "Oh, she's so cute. Is she autistic?" And she was 2 at the time. And I thought, no, of course she's not. She's smart. She knows how to count to 30. You know, she knows her ABCs. She's just fine. But that was the first time that I've had anybody really bring it up to me. And after that, a few other people just mentioned, well, maybe we should get her checked out speech-wise, because she was obviously, when you compared her with a group of children her own age, there was definitely some sort of delay.
You know, I sat up the rest of the night till 4 in the morning researching autism, and I knew that's my daughter. She has autism.
When I grow up, I want to be a movie director to direct some funny movies. There's Sydney and the Magic Ball. Once upon a time, there was a girl named Sydney, and she was looking for a great Easter present for her sister named Jane. She grabbed her backpack and went to the Rising River.
Sydney is just one of many of these children with the natural-born talents to shape the dreams of her own future. As we look back, to whom it may concern, my name is Derek, and I want to tell you a story. You see, my 6-year-old son, Corbin, was diagnosed with autism when he was 2.5 years old. A hearty revelation that has single-handedly changed our small young family forever. But when talking about autism, you will rarely hear me spouting off statistics about diagnosis rates, and you won't ever hear me on a street corner screaming about how this hideous, devastating disorder is cheating these children out of a normal life, because, well, autism is not. And quite frankly, normal is just a setting on the dryer. What would happen if Sir Isaac Newton, Nikola Tesla, or even Albert Einstein thought on a normal level? All 3 of them geniuses in their respective fields, and still, however, men who shared the characteristics of an autistic mind. So that puts us in a tough spot, don't you think? I mean, I must be crazy if I think I can actually convince the general public that people with autism are in fact the intellectual minds that will shape our future. And truly, I'm not sure if that's the entire message either. Because in one hand, we have children with a very different mind and potential to use that mind in a uniquely effective way. On the other hand, we have a definitively serious neurological disability. So as a parent, what do? I find myself in a paradox. When does disability become ability? And where do we draw that line? More importantly, who's drawing the line? Now, I don't want to tell you the story of autism from which you've read about in medical journals or heard in a news report. No, I want to tell you the story of autism from the front lines. The story we as parents and caregivers already know. That thing people with autism are simply born with. That thing autism should be known for. And why that thing is so important. This is the story of a thing without a name.
This hideous thing crawled out from under a rock and shouted to the world, I don't have a name. And everyone stared, minus the minority. And they hoped that everyone would learn to do the same. But it had scales and feathers, stripes and checkers, a sickly shade of green. The professionals were baffled by this creature all its own. It was like nothing they had ever seen. It belonged in no kingdom, and it didn't have a class. Was this hideous thing a premonition, or something left here by the past? Oh, the hideous thing that didn't have a name.
specialist doctor who had been studying Corbin for nearly a year prior. His words still echo as I think back. Corbin has autism.
Let me tell you a little bit about what autism is. First of all, it's not just one thing. Autism is actually a group of developmental disorders that impact our kids. And this disorder impacts their communication, their behavior, and also their social skills. And really, depending on the child, it determines on how severe each child is impacted. Autism is really a growing concern for health officials and for families in Utah and nationally. As we look at the prevalence rates, they continue to rise off the charts. Essentially, as we look at the most recent numbers that have come out, found that 1 in every 88 kids across the country are impacted on autism. And for some reason in Utah, we're hit even harder. Our numbers are 1 in every 47 kids. And depending on the area, it can be even more severe.
So there you have it. Autism is a neurological disorder affecting a plethora of developmental areas. And though clinically that's correct, autism is much deeper than a disability. Autism is also in many ways a personality.
I'm a little funny, helpful, independent, smart, and awesome.
My name is Brent Newbury.
I'm Julie Newbury, and our daughter Sydney is 6, and she has PDD-NOS on the autism spectrum.
With it being our first child, we might have gone years with just waiting, because the doctors were saying that she might just be developing slow speech.
Our story begins in 2006 when my wife Amanda and I were married. A couple of carefree newlyweds exploring the exciting world of adulthood. We had the world at our fingertips and life was ours for the taking. Towards the end of the year would bring us our first bundle of joy, a 7-pound healthy baby boy named Corbin. He came into the world as any typical healthy baby would. The same helpless cries, booty socks, and 2 a.m. feeding calls echoed our humble little condo. But as he grew, we noticed something was different about him. You see, by 8 months old, he began to crawl. However, he did not crawl correctly. He used this kind of worm move to get around. Corbin was indeed a bit different, and by his 18-month mark, we knew something was seriously going on with him. He went on to be evaluated for developmental delay and was immediately placed in a home therapy program. We found that virtually everything he was to learn had to be forcibly and consistently taught to him. He did not walk, he did not talk, and his ever-present wandering gaze felt as though hope would never prevail. We worked tirelessly to teach him sign language, my wife's hands clasped around his, pushing them together in a fashion I'd only seen before in Helen Keller movies. And like skipping records, we'd say, more, more, more. When Corbin turned 2, he was enrolled in a school for special needs children, and at this point was able to walk with assistance. Though he started showing signs of development, the reality of how far behind he was beginning to sink in. And on the 10th day of April, 3 days before Easter of 2009, we met with a